Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I remember the exact moment the room changed. The point when warmth from the fireplace stopped feeling comforting and started feeling like a signal, like something quietly shifting in the air. The four of us had gathered for what was supposed to be a simple winter evening together. Two long-time couples, all of us in our late 20s, wrapped in soft blankets, trading stories and pretending we didn't notice the subtle sparks that had been building for weeks. I was sitting on his lap, my husband's best friend, because I jokingly claimed the armchair was too cold, and he offered his seat without hesitation. It should have been harmless. We'd all shared laughs and inside jokes for years. But the second I settled in, his hands gently resting just above my hips for balance, I felt something I didn't expect. An awareness, a warmth that had nothing to do with the crackling fire behind us. Across the room, my husband stood close to her, his hand resting comfortably at her waist as they talked. They'd always had an easy friendship, their chemistry effortless in a way I used to admire. Tonight, though, it felt different. I caught the look they exchanged, slow, searching, almost curious, and I wasn't sure if I imagined it or if something unspoken was finally beginning to surface. The firelight painted all of us in soft gold, and the room felt smaller, more intimate, like the walls were leaning in to listen. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but louder than usual. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the closeness, or maybe it was the truth I'd been quietly avoiding. The four of us had been walking along a line for months, pretending we didn't notice where it might lead. I shifted slightly on his lap, trying to play it off as adjusting my blanket, but I knew he noticed the change in my breathing. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. The atmosphere was already speaking for all of us. And then, as if crossing some invisible boundary, my husband leaned in closer to her, and everything inside me stilled. Because in that moment I realized the night wasn't going to unfold the way any of us had planned. And none of us were ready for what happened next. Story continues in a second. But if you're facing relationship issues yourself, I've pinned 3 global best-selling ebooks in the comments. These have helped thousands fix their love life. Make sure to check them out. For a moment nobody spoke. The only sound was the steady crackle of burning wood and the faint hum of winter wind brushing against the windows. My husband pulled slightly back from her, as if realizing how close they had gotten, but the softness in their eyes didn't fade. And I wasn't sure if that made my breath catch from surprise or understanding. We'd all known each other for years, late 20s, comfortable in our routines, close enough that weekends like this felt natural. But somewhere along the line the comfort had grown layered. Friendship on the surface, curiosity simmering quietly underneath. None of us ever admitted it, but we all felt the shift. Hidden glances lingering too long, laughter with an edge of something warmer. The way touch, even innocent touch, sparked a little too brightly. Sitting there on his lap, I became aware of every tiny detail. His steady breathing, the subtle way he kept his hands respectful but supportive, the warmth of him beneath me. We'd always been playful, the kind of friends who teased each other without thinking twice. But tonight that playfulness felt charged, thoughtful, deliberate. He leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice just enough that only I could hear. "You okay?" A simple question, yet the gentleness in it wrapped around me like the fire's glow. "I think so," I whispered back, though I wasn't sure if that was true. My heart felt like it was trying to speak in a language I hadn't learned yet. Across the room my husband and her resumed talking, quiet, close, almost tender. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and he noticed it before I did. The look they exchanged wasn't inappropriate, but it wasn't entirely friendly either. It was careful, curious, and strangely, instead of jealousy, I felt this pull, this awareness that whatever was happening was bigger than any one of us. The room felt warmer, the air thicker, as though everything we had avoided acknowledging was slowly making its way into the open. Not spoken yet, not acted on, but undeniably present. Then my husband's eyes lifted and met mine. A quiet question, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. And in that single moment I realized we were all standing at the edge of a boundary none of us had intended to approach. Yet none of us seemed quite ready to step back from. The silence stretched long enough that I began to feel every heartbeat in my body. My husband's gaze lingered on me for a second too long, as if he was trying to read something on my face, something I wasn't even sure I understood myself. When he finally looked away, he didn't step back from her. If anything, he seemed more aware of her presence beside him, the warm firelight framing them like a portrait neither of them had meant to pose for. I shifted on the lap beneath me, not to provoke anything but because the moment demanded movement, some small acknowledgement that I felt everything happening in the room. He cleared his throat softly, his hands still respectful, still steady, though I could sense the tension in them now. Not inappropriate tension, just awareness, connection. A quiet pull neither of us had ever admitted out loud. He had always been the calm one in our group, the listener, the steady friend who noticed things before anyone else. And tonight I felt him noticing me in a way that wasn't flirtation, wasn't accidental. It was curiosity wrapped in restraint. "You're thinking too hard," he murmured so quietly that the other two wouldn't hear. "Maybe I am," I whispered back. His eyes softened and for a second the room fell away. No fire, no winter wind, no complicated friendship dynamics. Just the two of us caught in a moment that felt impossibly fragile. Across the room she laughed at something my husband said. Soft, warm, familiar. But the way she touched his arm as she laughed wasn't familiar. It was new, tentative, testing the weight of unspoken possibilities. My husband didn't pull away. Something in my chest tightened. Not jealousy exactly, but recognition, a mirror. The same boundary I felt pressing up against me was pressing up against him too. The four of us had always been close. Weekend trips, late-night talks, a shared sense of trust and comfort. But closeness has layers, and tonight those layers were peeling back one by one, slow and quiet, like the night itself was encouraging us to stop pretending we didn't feel what we felt. The fire cracked sharply, breaking the moment. He looked at me. My husband looked at her. She looked at all of us. And suddenly it became clear. Something was about to shift permanently. And we were running out of room to pretend we didn't see it coming. The heat in the room felt different now. Less like the fireplace and more like a pulse. Something shared between the four of us that none of us knew how to name. The crackling firelight danced across our faces, giving everything a soft, unreal glow as if the night itself were holding its breath with us. Story continues in a second, but if you're facing relationship issues yourself, I've pinned 3 global best-selling ebooks in the comments. These have helped thousands fix their love life. Make sure to check them out. My husband's voice drifted through the room. Lower now, slower, as he and her spoke in tones too gentle to pretend were casual. She leaned against the mantel, her posture relaxed, but her eyes carrying a question she never voiced. He mirrored it unknowingly, or maybe knowingly. I couldn't tell anymore. The space between them felt alive, and the space around me felt just as charged. The man beneath me shifted ever so slightly, not moving me, just grounding me. A reminder that I was still here, still in the middle of something we'd never dared approach. His hands didn't roam, didn't take advantage, but the steadiness of them at my hips was enough to make my breath tremble. He spoke quietly again, but this time his voice held something warmer, something that brushed against the edges of boundaries we'd drawn years ago. "You feel it too, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The truth sat thick in my throat, heavy with implications we weren't ready to face. When I finally looked at him, his expression wasn't playful or teasing. It was honest, open, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen from him. "That things are different tonight," I whispered. He nodded barely. "Different and not by accident." The words hit somewhere deep inside me, across the room. She reached up to adjust something on the mantel. My husband stepped closer to help, their shoulders brushing. Neither of them pulled away. Their shared inhale was quiet but unmistakable. He and I watched them, both of us absorbing a truth that had been quietly building for months. The room felt smaller, the fire louder, time slower. Then she turned, meeting my gaze. Not with guilt, not with confusion, but with a silent understanding. A question, a possibility. My husband's eyes followed hers to me, and something in his expression softened, opened, like he was waiting for a sign he didn't know he was allowed to want. The man beneath me exhaled, a quiet release of tension that somehow made everything feel even more fragile. The four of us were balanced on the thinnest edge of a moment, and all it would take was one decision to tip everything into the point of no return. The fire popped sharply, as if reacting to the tension spiraling through the room. No one moved at first. It felt like we were all hanging inside the same breath, shared, hesitant and full of meaning. None of us dared name. My husband finally stepped away from the mantel, but not from her. His hand brushed her back as he moved. A soft touch meant to guide her closer to the warmth of the fire. But the way she inhaled told me she felt more than just warmth. And he noticed. He always noticed subtle things, just never her subtle things. Until tonight, the shift between them was already complicated enough. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came when she looked at me instead of him. Not with guilt, not with apology, but with something deeper, something quietly bold. "We're all pretending we don't feel this," she said softly. Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't asking a question. She was stating a truth none of us could argue. My stomach tightened. My husband turned toward me, his expression startled, then conflicted, and the man beneath me stiffened slightly as though bracing himself for whatever came next. I hadn't expected her to be the one to say it first. The second twist wasn't her words. It was the way they opened a door inside this room that none of us had realized was unlocked. Because suddenly the dynamic wasn't just between pairs. It was all of us, a shared energy, a collective pulse. She stepped slightly closer to us, her eyes soft but impossibly direct. We've all been dancing around this for months, maybe longer. She glanced at my husband, then at the man whose lap I occupied, and finally at me again. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending. My heart thudded so loudly I felt it in my fingertips. My husband swallowed hard. You're saying what exactly? That maybe we're not as separate as we think, she replied. Her voice barely above a whisper. That maybe the lines we drew weren't as permanent as we believed. The air thickened, warm, electric, terrifying. I could feel the man beneath me tense, not from discomfort but from a restraint so tight it nearly vibrated. His hands held steady at my hips, but I sensed his pulse racing almost as fiercely as mine. Slowly, too slowly, my husband walked toward us. Not aggressively, not boldly, just drawn as if something magnetic had finally pulled loose. He stopped only a foot away, and suddenly the room felt too small for the four of us and everything we weren't saying. My husband's eyes searched mine. Hers shifted between all three of us. And the man beneath me let out a breath he'd been holding far too long. No one dared make the first move. No one dared step back either. We were suspended in possibility, dangerous, thrilling, impossibly close to something none of us could undo. And just as my husband opened his mouth to speak, to confess, to cross a line we could never return from, the lights flickered. Once, twice, the fire dimmed, and the room fell into a silence so thick it felt like the universe itself had paused, waiting for us to decide what came next. The lights flickered again, then steadied. But the moment had already shifted. Whatever invisible thread had been pulling the four of us together now felt taut, trembling as if one wrong breath could snap it or tie it tighter. My husband took a slow step toward me, toward us. His expression open in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not guarded, not confused, just honest. We need to stop being afraid of the truth, he said quietly. His voice wasn't trembling, but mine nearly did when our eyes met. The man beneath me gently tightened his hold, not possessive, just grounding, a reminder that he was here, fully present in this fragile, impossible moment. She moved beside my husband, close enough that their shoulders brushed, yet her gaze stayed locked on me. It felt like the air itself was waiting. Story continues in a second, but if you're facing relationship issues yourself, I've pinned 3 global best-selling ebooks in the comments. These have helped thousands fix their love life. Make sure to check them out. Then my husband spoke again, softer. I saw the way you looked tonight. And I understand it more than I want to admit. I inhaled sharply, but before I could answer she stepped forward, her voice calm, steady but carrying a weight we all felt. Maybe the real conflict isn't what we're feeling, she said. Maybe it's that all of us have been pretending we're okay with less honesty than we deserve. Something inside me loosened, not in surrender but in recognition. For the first time everything fit together. The tension, the attraction, the months of unspoken emotions. None of it was about betrayal. It was about transparency, connection. The way relationships evolve when people stop hiding from themselves. My husband reached out his hand, not to take me from the man whose lap I still occupied, but simply to touch my shoulder. A gesture of unity rather than claim. I'm not losing you, he whispered. We're just seeing the truth in a new light. For a moment the room softened. Tension didn't vanish. It transformed, becoming something warm, honest, unexpectedly grounding. The four of us stood together, not tangled but aligned in a way that felt strangely right. And just when it seemed like we had reached the emotional peak, when it felt like the conflict had finally found its resolution, she turned to all of us, took a breath and said, "There's something I haven't told you." The room stilled. She looked at my husband first, then at me, then at the man still holding me with steady patience. And with a trembling exhale she dropped the twist none of us saw coming. This wasn't the first night I felt this, and I don't think I'm the only one who's been keeping a secret. The fire cracked loudly as if announcing that the story wasn't finished yet. Her words hung in the air, soft but heavy, like the final snowflake before a storm settles into stillness. For a long moment none of us reacted. We were too full of truth, of fear, of something strangely beautiful. But instead of breaking us, her confession seemed to connect the last invisible thread between us all. My husband was the first to move. He reached for my hand gently, not pulling me away from where I sat, but simply offering reassurance, silent, steady, warm. The man beneath me let out a slow breath, one hand sliding to rest on the arm of the chair as if giving me space to decide what this moment would become. And she, eyes shining in the firelight, looked at us not with uncertainty but hope. "I think," my husband said quietly, "we've all been holding more inside than we realized." I felt my chest loosen, not with guilt but with clarity. Everything that had happened tonight, every look, every unspoken feeling, it wasn't a fracture. It was an awakening, a reminder that love is layered, that connection grows in ways we don't always expect. And sometimes letting light in doesn't break the walls, it softens them. I stood, my legs a little unsteady, and both men instinctively reached out, not to claim but to study me. That alone told me everything about the depth between us. She stepped closer, her hand brushing mine with the tenderness of someone finally stepping into honesty. "We're still us," I whispered, realizing the truth as I spoke it. "Just more open, more aware." My husband nodded, his forehead touching mine for a brief grounding moment, and maybe better for it. The man who had held me all night offered a small warm smile, one filled with understanding rather than tension. She reached for his hand, completing a quiet circle between us all. And for the first time that night, the room didn't feel charged. It felt peaceful, balanced. The fire crackled softly, the flames dancing in a gentle rhythm that seemed to echo the settling of our hearts. No chaos, no fear, just four people who cared deeply, learning that honesty didn't threaten connection. It strengthened it. As the night drifted into stillness, we moved closer to the fireplace together, wrapped in blankets, sharing quiet laughter and soft reflections. No boundaries crossed, no tension left unresolved, just warmth, trust, and a deeper appreciation for the love we each held. When the last log crumbled into glowing embers, my husband leaned in and kissed my temple. "Whatever comes next," he murmured, "we it together." And with the fire painting the moment in gold, I believed him completely.